to another C2C podcast. My name is Paul, and as always, I am joined by Geoff. Welcome, listeners. It's not actually a sea devil. That was me all along. Paul, hi everybody. And I thought I fooled you there, didn't I? You thought it was an actual sea devil, but you did. Go on, I bet you did, didn't you, Geoff?
I thought, how am I going to follow this? I could attempt to do another version, another voice, or I'll just come in normal. And I took the easy way out on that because I felt like
took the easy way out. You took the easy route.
Couldn't compete.
It's probably not a bad idea, mate. Yeah.
How do you top that one? You can't. Why don't you explain to everyone why you are doing a sea devil voice?
Yeah, this is because this particular podcast coming at you is part two of our kind of, well, I say part two of our Sea Devil kind of retrospective. In a previous podcast, it's a what? Oh, it's a sequel. Oh, look at that, sequel. Oh, I love where you're coming from. A sequel like sea, but actually the sea as in sea.
Very good.
Did you not mean that?
No.
I thought you did mean that.
No,
I'd have taken that one if I was you, mate.
Oh, okay.
Sequel. Never mind. Yes, we're really getting the hang of this. We've been podcasting for almost a year, Geoff, and we still sound like a bunch of bumbling amateurs, but it's all good, my friends, because we love our listeners. And boy, have we got some feedback for you on this one. So yes, Geoff and I looked at the Sea Devils because we have a Sea Devil episode coming up in very shortly, I think, in Easter. So we thought it would be a great idea.
We were riding the wave
of Sea Devil popularity to plumb the depths of history. I'm really going to need to come up with some seagoing metaphors, but that's as good as they get, I'm afraid. Right? So we looked at the Sea Devils previously, and we've just now been watching Warriors of the Deep.
Yeah.
Have we not, Geoff?
We have. We did
Did I get that right?
Last couple of days. That's correct. That is the one we were supposed to watch this week.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, last few days. Actually, I watched part 4 of that just last night.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah, I watched War of the Silurians last night.
Did you? You got your Flux Blu-ray?
Yeah, I have. So I enjoyed that very much. So I haven't seen Warriors of the Deep for a while. I've got it on DVD, which is on my shelf where hidden behind my Blu-ray collection sets. The shame of DVD. So yeah, I hadn't watched it for a while, but I bought it in a box set. I can't remember what they called it, but it had Sea Devil.
Yes, there was a box set, wasn't there?
Yeah,
I remember. I think that's how I got it, actually.
The Silurians as well. So it's a good episode. I couldn't remember.
Did you like it?
I did like it, yeah. And I did enjoy it. I felt a bit swayed by some of the comments that came in from people because we put out a tweet which if you're listening, you may have replied to, and we'll read out some of the comments later. But asking people what they thought of it, and some of the tweets back in were not keen. And I remember I saw one or two of them, and I thought, God, is it that bad? I quite enjoyed it.
Really that bad? Yeah.
But then when I went back through yesterday and having watched it, and then I gathered people's comments together, so we had them all in one place for tonight. I was like, oh, actually, yeah, most people liked it. So it was just, the bad stuff always kind of sticks in your head, doesn't it? So I saw these couple of sort of, people who didn't particularly like it. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's definitely a base under siege episode, which, as we all know.
Oh yeah, quite literally. Yeah,
does very well. It felt a bit like, in comparison to the third Doctor one, which is a lot more kind of James Bondish, kind of gung ho adventure, and lots of different places. They move around a lot, and it's all kind of a bit of a jolly. It's a bit more sort of light-hearted in a way, even though the centre of it, there's still the sort of conflict of, the Sea Devils want peace and everything. But this one felt a bit like, probably sounds really silly, but it felt like Die Hard with Sea Devils.
It's not exactly a light-hearted comic romp. It
No,
doesn't really fall into that category of Doctor Who story, does it? This
no,
one.
not at all. And I suppose a lot of the Fifth Doctor stuff is he's not like that particularly anyway. The Third Doctor stuff was, he's the dandy, isn't he? So it was always a little bit more kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's quite knowing, and it's a lot of fun. And that's not to say things can be fun, but in different ways.
Yeah,
And I enjoyed Warriors of the Deep, but it's not got the sort of frothiness in a way
yeah.
that the Sea Devils does. But yeah, I don't know. Is that a bad description? It was like Die
No,
Hard
no. Yeah,
because it was quite
I've
violent,
never
quite
heard.
action.
I've never heard Warriors of the Deep described as being anything like Die Hard before. So I think that might be a unique thing, Jeff. But I
Well, you've
think
heard it now.
you've heard
You
it
can
now. There it is,
rescue.
listeners. Tweet us in. Die Hard. Warriors of the Deep. The Die Hard of the Doctor Who canon. That's quite interesting. I mean, I must admit, I mean, this story has never been. I don't think it's ever been a fan favorite. I don't think it's ever been my favorite. Although it does kick off what is absolutely my favorite Davison season. Season 21 is my favorite by a long shot, and it was towards the end of this where I thought, I just wish Davison had stayed on another year. This whole 3-season pact that the Doctors seem to have lately is just nonsense. And Davison's kind of crystallized it in here. I think it was during this story that he kind of handed his notice in, or during the making of this story or something, that it was all announced. But anyway, back to the story in hand. So yeah, it is a bit of a kind of Cold War thriller, I think is the way to describe this, with some
Yeah,
slightly dodgy creature effects, putting it mildly. But
yeah. We'll come to that.
yeah, we will. We'll cover that off. So let's have a look at the story then. So I mean, the story kicks off. I mean, episode 1, part 1, moves at a pretty rapid pace. I think the
It
whole
does.
thing actually moves
Now,
pretty quickly.
I said to you before we started recording that I had possibly missed the kind of the reasoning and the crux of everything happening, and I rewound it to watch it again, and I was like, I'm not entirely clear, like what's instigated all of this, which is probably making me sound really stupid. But sometimes when you watch something and you're like, it wasn't overly clear. And sometimes when you watch a film and you don't know characters' names, it's because it hasn't been not sort of rammed down your throat, but hasn't been. I think information has to be given quite kind of clearly and concisely to lodge in your head and stuff. And I was like, I'm not quite sure the base is under attack.
Well, do you know what? I think maybe, just thinking about this, actually, maybe part of the reason is because the story starts and things are already kicking off. So
Yeah,
I think as we come into the sea base, so we have Sea Base 4, which is a military installation. Its job is to basically launch a whole bunch of killer missiles across the world at the enemy block. We don't know who the enemy block is. We don't know who
yeah,
this block represents. So that's never mentioned. We don't know if it's east, west, north, south,
no,
or whatever. But there are clearly power blocks at war, and a state of high tension exists between all of them. And we're sort of quickly thrown around a few characters. We have we have the commander, and was it Commander Vorshak? There's a bit of stuff between him and his second in command, I think, is Bulik. And then we have and then we get a very quick introduction. We actually see a brilliant, which I think is one of Pennant Roberts, the director. I think it's one of his best shots in the whole of his Doctor Who career. Is we have a pretty decent set and a nice crane shot coming down the levels. We have a multi-level set. We have lots of people walking up and down stairs. There's some geometry in that set. It has angles, it has depth, it has height, all of that. So I think it's pretty stunning, actually.
A question on that: how much of this was set, and how much was location?
Yeah, I was wondering that myself, actually, because a lot of the secondary sets seem to be in an actual installation. So I wonder if they were. Yeah, they had like real nuts and bolts on diving chambers
they
and
look
walls
really
and things.
good.
Like, health and safety
and
notices and stuff like that.
yeah, really detailed and really well
Mm.
done. And I was watching it and I thought they can't all be sets. And normally you can kind of tell, when something's been shot on film and when something has been shot on video, as in the studio.
Yes.
Although I don't know, you might know, but in this era, whether they were doing it all on video or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, they were doing most. I think they were doing outside broadcast on film. I think this one used a new video technique allegedly,
Uh,
or a new type of videotape, uh,
it
which
wasn't high def,
which
though, was
I
it?
don't know what the benefits of that were. It might have been some better definition than the stuff they were
Yeah, I
using
mean, it did.
previously,
It
but
did
trust
literally
you to
look.
be legged up on the mechanics of this stuff, Jeff. Honestly, it's just, someone who points cameras at things. This is the one thing you're worried about. Yeah. But I agree. Actually, I think the sets are pretty brilliant. Whether they're part built, part
It's got to
location,
be
part
a mix
hauled in
of
from
both, isn't it?
somewhere.
Yeah,
It's a mix of both, yeah, and it looks
yeah.
good. But okay, so we have we have that sort of establishing shot. We have some very quick interaction between characters. It's short, snappy dialogue. Some of it sounds a little bit kind of more poetic than it should, perhaps. But then we suddenly go to some reptiles in the middle of the sea, also, and it's very quick. There's no kind of mystery about who these creatures are. I don't think it's very suddenly we're there.
One of my notes was they waste no time in getting to them, and there's not even any
Absolutely.
kind of
Yeah, I think that's one of my notes as well.
there's no
Yeah.
reveal on them. They're
Straight
just
in there,
standing
isn't
there.
it?
Yeah, whereas in the Pertwee one, all we kind of saw was hands and things initially, and there was a slow kind of
That's right. Yeah, the slow
classic kind of
reveal.
monster reveal, and in this they're
Mm.
just sitting around having a cup of tea on their little computer thing,
Yeah, they
basically.
don't give a toss about any of that. It's like,
No,
right, here's our human contingent. There's our alien
yeah,
contingent, all set up within the first couple of minutes of
and,
the thing.
and
We
you're
don't
right, yeah.
know a lot about them all,
No.
but
So maybe that's partly where my confusion came from because I was a bit like, yeah,
is
you're
it too
right
quick for
into
you,
it.
mate?
Well, yeah, maybe it was just
Yeah.
late.
Okay, so let's have a think about this in context, right? So the story that immediately preceded this was the Five Doctors, right? A 20th anniversary special. But before that, we had the King's Demons, which was really kind of stagey and theatrical, and in my opinion, yeah, not the best kind of story at all. But nonetheless, it is what it is. But so the King's Demons is the official season 20 closer. Then we
Right.
get a few months after that finish, we get the Five Doctors, which was the whole, was it 90 minutes or so broadcast from beginning to
Mm.
end. So it's no, I think certainly in the UK it wasn't ever split into 4 parts. I think it was done that repackaged overseas, and then a few months later, the following year, 1984, we get Warriors of the Deep, which suddenly came on, and it looked and again I remember at the time when this went out, I was really excited because we kind of knew that Silurians and Sea Devils were sort of coming back, and I was too
Mm.
young to remember them from the Pertwee days, but I'd read the Target novels of the Cave Monsters and the Sea Devils by that point, so I knew of them, and obviously people had kind of talked about these guys in fan circles. They were monsters that were held in very high regard,
Yeah.
and like you said, when in the Sea Devils we get that kind of slow reveal of the monster, and it's the same in the Silurians or the Cave
Yeah.
Monsters as
Yeah.
well. Doctor Who and the Silurians, isn't it? It's full title. But again, in that, I think we get a really slow reveal. I think it probably takes about 4 episodes till we actually see a Silurian, or But of course, yeah, within 2 minutes, 3 minutes, they're here, they're there, and we get some
Mm.
nice model shots as well. This is Matt Irving
Yeah.
doing his really good model work in Doctor Who, which I think is among the best that we'd seen,
Yeah.
up to
Well,
this
I
point. And
couldn't
it's
tell
really
whether
good
it
stuff.
was I couldn't tell whether it was actually underwater models or not, and then there
Mm.
was something in it, and I was like, "Oh, no, it can't be. They've just cleverly lit it and done some smoke and stuff." But yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really good. Yeah,
Yeah, very good.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
enough to
really
kind
like the
of,
model work in
you know,
this.
trick me on it initially.
Mm. And again, I remember when first watching the opening of this, I thought, well, this is really good. I'm really into this, because I liked the sort of fast moving element of it. Yeah, no, let's not dick around revealing the monsters. Let's just show them,
Yeah.
And I think it's through the Silurians that we get the sign of a confrontation. Then it's the Silurians leading the charge against the humans here, and we see it from their perspective, which actually, when you think about it, is perhaps quite interesting, because we don't always see that. With the
No.
Sea Devils episode we watched before, right? We don't see any of it from the creature's point of view. It's
No.
all from a human point of view. So we get a little bit. I'm being really generous here. Actually, we get a bit of an understanding as to why they want to invade. We perhaps don't. We know they're going to invade, and we see it from their perspective. You know, they're
Yeah,
going
I
to attack
mean,
the human base, and
yeah,
they've got a plan which they're about to set in motion. We don't
yeah,
quite know what it is or why, but okay, we know something's about to kick off. But as I said, on the sea base itself, things are already kicking off.
mm,
Everything's in a state of high alert. The computer operator, the student, his name Maddox, he's suddenly entrusted with this massive responsibility which he never
oh,
asked for. He was only there as a sort
is
of
that
job
when
placement understudy, and
he gets plugged into the Matrix?
he does get plugged into
Yeah.
the Matrix, 20 years before the Matrix was even a thing. So, and actually, this is something else, actually, which I've got in my notes, because this kind of, so 1984 is kind of at this very start of the sort of cyberpunk kind of wave in science fiction. The novel that kicked it all off, right here, Neuromancer, was published in 1984. So that's the book
Right.
that kicked off the whole kind of cyberpunk thing. Now, obviously, all these influences are sort of coming together, and this
Yeah.
idea of sort of human technological interface with a computer, it's sort of been bandied around in science fiction. But in the 80s, a lot of different writers sort of had these a lot of ideas where all this stuff kind of coalesced. And again, in
Yeah.
the early 80s, I remember 1984. I used to have a ZX81, which was like the first home computer. 1 kilobyte of RAM, ladies and gentlemen, and it was the most amazing thing ever. Me and my mate, we used to program this all kinds of weird stuff in BASIC, and this 1 KB of RAM on this machine. But again, there was so there were a lot of influences. There were things like the idea of mutually assured destruction when I was at school was massive. It was something we all went to school thinking. There was a lot of films, there was TV shows, there was things like Threads where we all had to watch Sheffield get blown up by atomic bombs, and the threat of being invaded by the Russians. It was always the Russians, and Reagan with his Star Wars platform,
Yeah.
the whatever it was, the SD Strategic Defense Initiative or Satellite Defense, whatever it was. All this stuff was boiling over, and I remember I was enthused by it. I loved it. I just thought it was a creative, melting pot of things. And my parents and other people had grown up in the 60s when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the Cold War in the mid-80s was a real thing. It was a big thing. It kind of haunted every single waking thought. And the only thing that we had to kind of break it up was things like Doctor Who and the Tracy Ullman show and what have you. So, and Top of the Pops, all that sort of stuff. But I'm kind of digressing now and dipping into memory lane. But I think what's important here is a sense of context. So we have this big cultural, political thing going on where the threat of nuclear war is seems to be very, very real. We got Margaret Thatcher calling a general election, which for some weird reason put a stress on the production of this thing. So it was brought forward. They didn't have enough time to really sort of spend to fully develop the pre-production part of the thing. They planned this thing, and then suddenly they had 2 weeks. They were robbed of 2 weeks. So I think, getting to the bottom of this, then, in a nutshell, I think what they turned out was pretty good, although I didn't appreciate it that much at the time, because the thing that really got me on this, the thing that killed the whole show for me on this, was that bloody Merca and that pantomime horse. I remember as a kid just watching it.
I tweeted
Part
someone
3 comes out, and I thought, what the fuck?
It's literally a pantomime horse alien. And there was one
It
thing.
really is. Yeah.
They had there was a couple of point of view shots from the Merca, maybe, and
fisheye views.
yeah, and again,
The
could be
veiny
wrong,
eye.
but I can't remember seeing that in any episode before. But then I've not watched every single serial, but it made me. It was a big thing in RTD's first era. Lots of that point of view type of thing. So with some sort of effect on it or whatever. But yeah, I saw it and thought, oh, that's new, but we probably have seen it in there before, because it's not exactly groundbreaking.
Yeah, I think we Probably have done. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not
I know for
sure.
sure there was a point of view, a creature point of view shot in Earthshock, because we see the Doctor and Adric and what have you through the android's kind of lens, but obviously that's
Yeah,
been straight back to cyber control. And I think
yeah.
I think this is another thing which influences Warriors of the Deep as well, because Earthshock had been quite a big story, and
Mm,
that was written as I mean, I think Sayward was really massively influenced by James
yeah,
Cameron stuff,
yeah.
and I think again what you've got here throughout the Davison era, but more so in this one, because I think season 21 is really where Eric Sayward was able to take creative control.
Mm,
But I think from interviews was still getting hampered by all kinds of other inputs. We want this monster, we want that, we want to bring these guys back. As I said, you got a fan turned consultant who seems to be putting his oar in and kind of mixing things up a little bit. And of course you got the stresses to get like show busy actors in just to get a guest slot and stuff like that. Hence, whatever. So I think the whole thing of Warriors of the Deep, I know I've said it, but it is of a really stressful production, probably something along the akin to Blade Runner, with Ridley Scott sort of pushing people and everyone in a state of high just tizziness and just getting into right state with things. But I think watching it this time round, that tension comes through on screen
mm.
quite nicely. One
Yeah,
thing I
it
always
works for it.
disliked about this was how brightly lit it is. It's
Yeah,
a constant bugbear of 80s TV, not just Doctor Who, but all kinds of stuff. And yet, actually, it's not every set that's lit brightly. It's really only that control room set,
yeah,
and the secondary areas, the corridors and the chemical room and the reactor room and all that, they're actually lit really well. They're not just bright white.
no.
There's shadow in there. There's a depth to them. There's some really nice camera work.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Watching these older episodes back, and really
Mm.
anything kind of older on telly, you notice that a lot of stuff, it's lit, but it's not lit in any kind of stylistic way.
Yeah, there's no cinematic, there's no photography as such, is there?
No,
It's just like we need to show everything on the
yeah.
screen, and that's what the lighting guys are told to do.
But when you do see a bit that is, interestingly lit, it's that it
Mm.
jumps out because it's quite
Yeah.
common in it. It's a bit like those bits in Kinder where it's
Mm.
Tegan, isn't it? And she's just in the black space, and then she's lit.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
quite a
Really
striking
effective. Yeah.
piece. Yeah, and they duplicate it and stuff, don't they?
Mm.
And that kind of stands out. But then everything else is lit quite flat.
Yeah,
It's very
there's no
uniform.
shadow. Everything is
No,
literally flat, isn't it?
yeah,
There's no area that is not illuminated.
yeah,
And apparently, I think a lot of that is down to again, the unions in the 80s were being broken up by the Thatcher government. But I think, yeah, you're right. That there was. I think the creatives, from reading interviews and seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff, the directors and the writers and even the actors, they all wanted something, to bring a bit more life to these
yeah,
stories. And yet it was always the case, like the lighting guys just were told they had to light everything. That was their job. That was their
yeah,
goal in life. Just stick a bloody light on it, because I'm sure, I can't remember what it was I heard him, but it might have been behind the scenes on Shada or something, but it was where there's a conflict between them, saying, "Oh, Matt Irvin, I think it was actually, because he's been quite vocal on this. To make the model work look good, turn the lights down, because
mm,
otherwise you show every flaw on the on the thing. You see the Airfix glue,
yeah,
and the fact that it's an inside out fag packet, lit nicely, it can look $1 million.
mm,
Lit badly, and it just looks like a fag packet turned
yeah.
inside out, and so that's no good. And you get the scene where the lighting guys are saying, no, if you turn the lights down, mate, they won't see it on the telly.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
these would have been people that are on contract with the BBC and employed, and
Yeah.
they work in Studio 4 or he works in Studio 8 or whatever it
Mm.
would be, and they're just, I was going to say their job's worse.
Well, no, it's you said it right there. I think it's contractors.
Yeah,
There's a contract. You work these hours in that, and again, it's a sort of it's professional trades people thing, isn't it? Right, where you get paid for a job to do a job within certain hours. That job has very strict regulations and guidelines.
Yeah.
That's what you do to make to be a professional. You work to those guidelines. So if a director comes along and says to you, actually, no, just change that a little bit, then it's questioning your professionalism. That's, I think, how it would have been seen from that point. But what we seem to see retrospectively is a lack of creativity from those technicians and things, because they're doing their job, right? So and their job isn't a creative job, it's a very technical job. Switch the lights on.
That's it. It's turn it on. You've got 10 scenes to shoot today. If you spend an hour per scene lighting it stylistically, you're going to get 4 of them done. And you do get styled lighting in films of the time. But not so much on TV, because they don't have the time for it.
Films are single camera, aren't they? So you're lighting from one specific angle. With these things, multi-cameras, 3 or 4 cameras all around the studio, pointing at different directions, some for close-up, some for wide shots. They've all got to be lit, so they've all got to see the thing.
Because that's another point. You could light something and frame it, think that looks great, but then it looks terrible on another camera, because you can see the light that's
from the other side of the studio. Exactly.
Something's causing a shadow. I realised I compared this, or called this Die Hard in Doctor Who, but of course this was before Die Hard. So
way before Die Hard, massive before Die Hard.
So before someone calls me out on that, I mean it's themes of being stuck in a place.
Thematically, yes.
So all actually,
I got
what
you,
you
mate.
could say is Die Hard is a base under siege film.
Definitely a base under siege. Yeah. But okay, so we get Silurians back. We see them first, and immediately they look different. I mean, again, to me at the time that didn't really matter, because I'd never even seen the Silurian story from 1970. I wasn't even born then, so I know. It didn't really bother me. I think people
they look
generally
good,
prefer the original. I think they look okay. I mean, the only weird thing about this one was the fact their third eye, right, sort of flashes Dalek style when they speak.
I didn't get that.
Which is weird.
They look a bit like Davros, which was
because it's a very organic thing, isn't it? Right? So it's right there.
I didn't get that. And
why would it flash when they speak?
Yeah, and the
biotechnology or something.
Yes, I suppose it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, I do remember thinking it was a bit odd. And they had the kind of it's like a waistcoat thing, but it was obviously supposed to be part of them, wasn't it?
Like a carapace or something.
With the spiky bits on the back. But it wasn't sort of attached. And there's a couple of shots where two of them walk through, and you can see the the flaps from the headpiece poking out. But again, I suppose if you noticed it at the time, you might sort of have a little chuckle at it, but you didn't know any different back then, Joe, and we've said that before. You can watch stuff from 20, 30, 40 years ago and kind of laugh at the effects and things, but you have to look at
I don't know, mate. I think, all right, here's the other thing about Warriors of the Deep, right? Fun factoid, people. So I remember, again, when I watched this back in the 80s, right, and sort of loved part 1, loved part 2, part 3. I was getting increasingly cheesed off with it. One thing I absolutely hated, and it came back to me when I was watching this like a cold horror from the back of my brain and beyond, was two things. Firstly, the really slow, ponderous movements of the creatures. Why? There's no need for that, right? Just it's like, because they're aliens, they've got to move and talk like this.
The sea devils, I think. They're all walking through a corridor in one of the later episodes.
Yeah, it's so ponderous like that.
But one of them is just like,
his head flops. Yeah, he's like, he doesn't care.
I want to get out of here, guys.
Yeah, I'm going to pay for this bloody job.
Yeah, and I remember thinking the sea devils look like they've shit themselves.
I know, it's ridiculous. It's crazy, isn't it? Huh?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I suppose they can't be rushing around, but they could have walked somewhat normally. I like the sea devils outfit, even though the extended neck to hide the operators,
hide the face.
Yeah, it was a bit weird, and that a couple of times they sort of flopped over and things. But again, the style on it was good. They didn't have the big ears, did they?
No, so again, the Sea Devils had a bit of a redesign as well,
Yeah,
hadn't they? You know, the actual face mold. The front face of it looked the same, but yes, they
yeah,
lost those flappy ears, and they had to wear sort of samurai looking
yes,
helmets as
yeah,
well.
with the big spikes on the
Yeah,
shoulder.
yeah. Which I really like, actually.
Yeah,
I
I
like the
did
idea
too.
of it. I thought the
Mm,
execution, okay, maybe this is a consequence of cutting the pre-production
yeah,
time down. They just had to go with sort of half-finished costume that hadn't been fully tested. But
yeah,
I like the idea. You know, so we had stream vests in the Pertwee story. Now we got samurai warrior
yeah,
type people, right? And I do wonder if, because you know the legend of the Sea Devils coming up, that happens in the
mm,
China Sea.
mm,
So, you know, you just wonder if, I mean, obviously we got sea devils and Silurians or whatever they're going to be called all across the world. So,
yeah,
you know, so I like the idea that, you know, there are like different uh, communities of them, perhaps,
yes,
you know, that
yeah,
maybe have some differences in their culture. Because
yeah,
again, one thing that always annoys me, and it's not just a Doctor Who thing, it's a lot of TV sci-fi in general. We see aliens, there's like one color, one creed, one race. You know,
yeah.
it's less so nowadays, I think. It's, you know, but certainly back in the 80s, it's like the aliens all look the same. You know, they all want the same goal, and maybe one or two of them are sort of
Yeah,
against
I
it
like
for
that,
story purposes. But
you know, the Silurians and the Sea Devils are, you know, do they call themselves cousins or something? You know, they're of the same
yeah,
sort of
cousins
species,
or
aren't
brothers,
they?
don't they?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and it was a bit more than just
But
like
they actually call each other Sea Devils and Silurians in this, which is weird because
yeah,
okay, so the Silurians were named erroneously, as was pointed out, you know, by Fan in whatever he was called in 1970 or something, and that was addressed in the Sea Devils episode that we watched, where Malcolm Hulke had renamed them Eocenes, only to figure out that that was actually probably wrong as well. But yet they call each other as Silurians and our Sea Devil brothers, and you know, and again, Sea Devils wasn't a name that they used themselves in the
no,
Sea Devil story.
no,
It was the mad raving guy at the end of part one who said the devils or something, and because they were at sea, it just became a bit of a shorthand. But now they are categorically Sea Devils,
yes,
Sea
yeah.
Devil warriors,
I
right?
wonder
So
if Legend of the Sea Devils might give them a species name. You know,
maybe.
yeah, you never
Yeah,
know.
yeah, or maybe they do come to be known as sea devils within
This is it.
that,
Well,
you
that's
know.
how it
So
started.
and
Yeah, well, it's the
acquire that
legend
name.
of, isn't it? So maybe this is
Mm,
set
the
before
legend of
all
the
of this
Sea
other stuff,
Devils.
and that'll be where it came from. Yeah. So tell me about
Yeah.
the Merker or the Merkin.
Oh no, man! Oh my God, this is terrible. You know, so I didn't get to finish my story. This does lead on to the Merker, so it is
Okay.
still on topic. Don't worry, I'm not going off at a tangent, right? So because you were saying about actually, what were you saying about? So long ago now, I forget. But
Pantomime
something. Oh
aliens.
yes, we've got to be understanding that this was 40 years ago of its time. No one would have really cared that the Sea Devils didn't look that great. Actually, I think in 1984 we did, because the point is, as I was saying, I love part one, love part two. At the end of part two, the Merker makes its entrance, and I remember just crying in horror. When part three unfolded, which is pretty much all about the Merker incursion, I
Yeah.
was just, I actually wrote this. This is the thing now. I wrote to points of view,
Did you?
right? I did. I wrote the points of view to make my point of view known to the BBC, that I was
Sam Robinson.
disgusted, actually disgusted with the special effects and creature effects in Doctor Who. I love the models, but the creatures were embarrassing. I think I used those words, and I did definitely use the word disgusted, that they were just pointing kitchen handles with a bloody red light. That was about as thrilling as something, actually not very thrilling to a 13-year-old at the time, but the thing is, I think again in the 80s audiences were starting to expect a bit more, because
Yeah,
at this
true.
time, so
Yeah.
the Sea Devils in 1970s pre-Star Wars, right? And by the time this thing comes out, we'd had Star Wars, The Empire
Mm.
Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Aliens is waiting around the corner. We'd had the first Alien film, Ridley Scott. We'd had
Mm.
Blade Runner. So now audiences are starting to see what can be really achieved with good special effects. Now, obviously, Doctor Who has always been on a shoestring budget and was never ever in those days going to be able to compete. But as an audience, we really, really wanted it to. I know I've said when we talked about modern day episodes, when we're talking about Flux, we look at Flux and this is how I wanted Doctor Who to look when I was
Yeah.
back in those days. I genuinely did. And there was no reason in my mind why Doctor Who should look as crap as it did when it came to creatures, and certainly laser beams. They couldn't even seem to do laser beams. It was a really poor effect. And, and I wasn't an expert on TV then. I was just a kid, teenage kid who just wants his favorite program to look the best it possibly can. But the thing that really got me was the Merca. So at the end of part 2, we have this extended sequence where the base is under siege under assault from two fronts. We have the Sea Devils coming in at one entrance, and we have this monster thing coming in at the other. And we can see the kind of foam doors bulging outwards. And again, when you watch Doctor Who, even as a kid, you think, okay, we'll just let it go. I hope my mum's not watching, because she would absolutely take the crack out of this. And then, of course, the creature comes through. And do you know what? Watching it again, I got the cold shivers again, because this thing hurts, right? It really, really hurts as from all those years ago, because my mum did walk in at this point, and as I said on this podcast before, she's never been a fan of Doctor Who, anything like this. She would look at it, she would immediately take it down, and she ripped it to shreds. And it was just awful, because I'd really liked the story up, and I'd still like the story. The story is a fast-moving thriller, kind of tense kind of thing, and the threat is escalating. We got threat from inside with the two enemy agents. We've got Dr. Salau and all that sort of thing. We've got some techie stuff with Maddox, who's a bit kind of shaky. We've got the Doctor who was presumed dead, and you know what I mean. And I tell you what, it's just. And then we get this bloody thing coming out that looks like frigging. It actually is a pantomime horse, know. And okay, you can see they made an effort. It's got some fronds, some seaweedy stuff, and some big eyes. But I think the movements of it, where it's swaying its head from left to right and just blundering down, just flat rubbered feet plapping against the floor. It's just fuck. It's awful. And of course, to make matters worse, years later, right? When was it? Paul Merton had Michael Grade on Room 101, and the clip they used to kind of in defense of Michael Grade's argument that the program was past its time and it needed to go, was they used this clip from Warriors of the Deep featuring a Merca, and the whole audience laughed, and I felt that pain again. I was older this time, my 20s or 30s or something, and I'm like, oh my God, it still hurts. And whenever anybody wants to use Doctor Who as an example of ridiculous TV, it's always this that they use, the worst possible moment, out of context, cold, white, stark lighting, as we've already said, and this bloody creature that, despite the effort put into it, just did not convince at all. Could never even hope to convince.
Slightly off topic, but it's going to be interesting, the Michael Grade interview on the next collection box set.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, because that will be interesting. Yeah, I mean, I still can't stand the guy, but
if you put a bit of money behind the show, then it would have been different. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think it's even as easy as money. I think, I mean, clearly time has always been a short commodity on Doctor Who as well, and even less so, or even more so on this one. With the whole thing being brought forward by 2 weeks. But part of the brilliance of Doctor Who is how it has kind of produced really good stuff on a thin budget, on the restrictions that it's always had, and that in some ways kind of spurs on the creativity of the thing. And I think with the rest of this season, we've got some brilliant creativity. I think even in this story, it rears its head. It's almost like it's about to show. But for me, Warriors of the Deep, whilst the script I think is mostly really good, the intentions behind it are good, they're somehow lost in the production of the thing. It's almost like the production crew didn't get the memo, or the same memo that that the makers of the other stories in this season got. Because when you compare it to Frontiers, which is a really studio-bound story, Caves of Androzani, which is, for me, is just phenomenal. Even Planet of Fire, right? Okay, so it's all on location in the Canary Islands, and even a 2-part Awakening. Strong stories, equally as strong, but somehow made better by the creativity behind them. And all of these stories had their problems. They all had no money. And, Caves of Androzani also had a really crap monster, but it had a director who lit it better and was forceful with his lighting crew to make sure he got the shot you want. Graham Harper, who went on to direct in the in the modern series, their Age of Steel, Rise of the Cybermen, and a few others. So and Pennant Roberts for me has never been the person, or isn't it? I think he was an old school director. He was really good. In the 70s, he did. Tenko. He was on Blake 7 as well, which was another big favorite of mine. But I think he'd done A Face of Evil, which is not really a favorite, and it's a very kind of that their background is very sort of theatrical. Maybe not necessarily in the theatre, but from the days when TV mirrored the theatrical process, right? Where actors are on a stage and literally it's just a camera pointing at them, and they, very dialogue heavy stuff. And the script for Warriors of the Deep, in some ways like Earthshock, it deserves something different to that style of direction. It's not a stagey piece, but it's kind of, it was presented in that way. So we have some very stagey kind of sort of arrangements of characters. We've got little trios and little double acts. We've got people talking off camera aside to each other, but we can clearly hear them, and the people they're talking about, there's a shot with Solau and Nielsen talking behind Maddox, right, about Maddox. It's like, come on, you could be a little bit more creative, a little bit more intelligent with this stuff. And I think that for me is really and crucially where Warriors of the Deep falls down. Others may disagree, but that's my personal opinion.
If this was done now, you'd be able to shoot this so much more exciting.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
And again, with the creatures moving ponderously, when the Sea Devils invade the base, it doesn't convince. When the Silurians, take something, lift off their manipulator and carry it very slowly and walk very ponderously across the thing, even in their own ship, right, which is nicely dressed, it looks organic, so it looks like it's part of the same technology, and they move like bloody, I don't know what they move like. It's like, this is how aliens have to move, let's move them like this. It's just put a bit of life into it. Again, when you compare it with Earthshock, right, which was directed by Peter Grimwade. Now, Peter Grimwade had he was good at this sort of, he got it. He pushed for things again to be fast paced. Those androids moved, they weren't ponderous. The Cybermen moved a little bit like that, but they were just out of cold storage. For one thing I did enjoy about Warriors of the Deep, which was a really good thing about the direction of it in the early stages, when the Sea Devils are being awakened, there's a really great shot of them sort of coming to life, and it's very eerie. There's a bit of there's some effects put on the I think it's like a backdrop. There's a painting to make the cavern in which they're being awakened look deeper than it is.
It was a mirror, I think, because I
was it a mirror?
One that was sort of left a shot moved, and then the one next to it moved exactly the same, and I was like, oh yeah, I can see they're in there's mirrors either side, which is that was quite clever because it made it look a lot bigger than it was.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So there are things there, but they just, for me, never quite seem to come to life. And I think by part 3, but again, even in part 3, we got some good stuff in there. The whole thing with the UV light, ray gun sort of thing, that looks pretty decent.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in it. I think it's interesting hearing, our 2 points of view on it, coming from different corners. That you watched it when it went out, and I wouldn't have done.
You're calling me old. You calling me old again?
No, no, because there's not that much between us. But you saw its shortcomings then, and I'm a bit embarrassed by it, and I'm looking at it now, and enjoying it, but still, but seeing things that could have been better, but not necessarily to the detriment of it for me. I'm just kind of because I'm accepting, but that's what it was like then, and they had a compressed schedule on it, lack of money and things, but also that's kind of how the state of effects work and stuff at the time. So it didn't kind of it didn't spoil it all for me. So tell me, what do you think of Peter Davison's performance in this, and
Oh,
also the companion. So I've not seen a lot of Turlough before.
haven't you?
No.
Yeah. What do you think of him then?
Yeah, he's all right. I mean,
Have you seen the stories that he was introduced in the season previous? So you had the whole Black Guardian trilogy.
no, I haven't seen that lot. No,
Oh, have you really? God, I
no.
can't even imagine going through life not having watched those. That's just weird.
Well, I've
So
obviously got the collection set with
yeah,
that's with Nissa and Tegan, isn't it? In those
yeah.
stories. What series is that? 18?
Well,
Is it
yeah. When Nissa and
19?
Tegan came into it.
No, Davison's first
Oh,
series.
first, yeah, 19. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then they haven't put any of his others out yet, have they?
No, and I
No.
really want season 21 to come in the collection because
Yeah,
I'd say it is my favourite one. So
his is I've got the least
yeah,
of his stuff. I've got like the Visitation, which
really,
is excellent.
yeah,
And I remember wanting to buy Caves of Androzani, but it was really expensive for a long
right.
time. And I just thought, yeah, I'm not paying that for it.
Oh.
So yeah, I haven't seen that, which I'm going to
Well, you
cut.
haven't seen the Caves of
No,
Androzani?
no.
Oh man, we got to do that. When you see that, we do a podcast
Yeah.
because
I
right.
really want to see it. Yeah.
Oh mate, I mean, I'm probably building it up too much, but it's always been my number one Doctor Who story.
Yeah.
Always, bar none. You know, I know a lot of people do say the same sort of thing, but and other people say, well, it's overrated. What's so good about it? But mate, I could talk for hours about the Caves of Androzani.
Well, I know
We put that one on. It's a 10-part podcast. I kid you not, with notes.
It's very highly rated, you know, and like I said, I wanted to see it, you know. So yeah, Turlough, I thought.
Turlough, okay, so Turlough was introduced the previous season as a kind of a schoolboy who with an alien background. It was all very mysterious. We don't know where he came from or anything, but he was given a mission by the Black Guardian in three stories that played out over 3 stories in season 20 to kill the Doctor.
Right.
And he's never the TARDIS crew at the time, so Nissa and Tegan never really trusted him, but the Doctor did trust him because the 5th Doctor is a very trusting person. He's very tetchy, very short-tempered with his companions, but for some weird reason, he completely, utterly trusted Turlough. Or did he? Did he always see what he was about and kind of almost egged him on to do his thing, knowing that he would come through it, you know? And you never quite know. I mean, you know, for the record, I absolutely love Peter Davison's Doctor. I think he's brilliant. And but Turlough is, it's a very strange relationship that they have. And I noticed that when at the start of this story, Turlough comes in. It's all I always thought is weird. Turlough comes in doing his shirt collar up, which looks very scruffy, and he's doing his tie up, which continues to look scruffy. And he always wears the same bloody clothes, and it's ridiculous because it's a long time since he was at school. He hated the school anyway. He was a bit of a cuckoo in the thing. So, you know, he's of alien origin. And yet he's doing his school tie-up. And there's this weird sort of thing with Turlough where he still looks like he wants to kill the Doctor. I mean, throughout this, he tells Tegan, I think at the end of part 1 or start of part 2, that the Doctor's dead. There's nothing we can do. Let's hot foot it back to the TARDIS.
Blasé about it, wasn't he? He was like, oh yeah, he's fallen in the, you know, he's fallen in and he's immediately drowned. His foot touched the water and he's drowned.
He hasn't possibly survived that, despite the countless other times he has come back from the dead. And when he does meet the Doctor again, it's like, oh, yeah, okay. So, you know, I seem to be really overjoyed or anything to see it.
I didn't really kind of buy it, and I think 5 was not my favourite. You know, when I buy you know, Big Finish, for example, I go towards 4 and you know, quite a like for 6 as well, and 8. And I've got quite a bit of 5 now, but I think it's the sort of I think it's the companions I go for more. Like you said, he's quite tetchy, and it's weird because, you know, he is a good person, a good, you know, good Doctor, of course. But yeah, there's the sort of, he's quite irritable, isn't he? And you know,
he is quite irritable. But then, to be honest, if I'd had Adric and Tegan in the TARDIS sort of bickering all the time, I'd be quite irritable as well.
No wonder 4 fell off the radio mast to get away from
Yeah. What I really like about the Fifth Doctor is, I think for the first time he really sort of portrayed that idea of, and we see it a lot with Matt Smith, the ancient alien
Yeah,
in
I
trapped
was going to
inside a
say
young person's
he is
face.
quite authoritative,
Mm,
despite that sort of youthful, facade on the character, and yeah, you do get that feeling,
mm.
that there is this older, sort of, person,
Spirits.
spirit entity there,
Yeah.
and it is again because I think in each Doctor, they all have aspects and elements of what's come before, but they need to
Mm,
do it their own way, because otherwise
yeah.
you're just basically playing you are playing the same part, but it has to be different at the same time, and so Davison being this sort of slightly grumpy, irritable, but kind of
Mm.
ancient thing was quite different to Tom Baker, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it was,
Although
but
he has moments like that, of
yeah,
course, but
he
it's
does. Yeah.
all the Doctors have got you know a hopeful aspect to them,
Mm.
and doing the right thing and stuff like that, and that comes out in all of them. Do you
Well,
know what I mean?
that is the Doctor's moral standpoint, isn't it?
Yeah,
That he will help, or they will help people rather than destroy them.
yeah,
And I think actually that's a real crux of this story, isn't it? Because obviously, as events play out, the Doctor again wants to try and bring peace between humans
mm,
and
mm,
reptiles, and
mm.
this sort of defining story point that's always been part of these. When
Well,
when
again,
these guys appear.
it harks back to the Sea Devils episode, isn't it? And the way three
Mm.
is with them, and the end of this is quite downbeat. He's
Oh
won,
man, it's very dime beat.
at what
Pretty much
cost?
everybody dies.
Yeah, well,
Jeez.
they stand there, don't they? And they're all dead, and
Yeah.
you've
Actually,
had
I was thinking Bulick, I think, survives. We don't see him, but I think he's the only one we haven't seen get
yeah,
killed. So he's probably the lone survivor in this
yeah,
entire
yeah,
sea base. Walks out of the chemical because he's been holding the hexachromite hose pipe up
mm,
to the ventilation shafts, and he'd probably walk out of there saying, "Right, who's for dinner then?"
yeah.
Oh,
No, they've
oh
gone and
God,
they're all dead.
oh,
Yeah,
oh
and
shit,
yeah,
yeah.
it is very down, and it ends very suddenly as well. He says, there should have been
Ends
another
on the
way.
Doctor's line, doesn't it? But you see the Doctor's face at that point as well. So he's okay. So let's go back to Pete Davidson as a Doctor here, right? So we have this kind of enthusiastic, breathless young Doctor who,
Mm,
yes, very titchy, very irritable. But actually, in this season, I think he's less of that because he's only got two companions now instead of
yeah,
three. So we've got Tegan, who he's got a really good relationship with now.
yeah,
It's sort of
yeah,
you get a feel for this. There's a shorthand between them. When he says "Make a wish, Tegan," he knows she's going to close her eyes and he can blast the UV at Nielsen and do him in. And that's the other thing. We've got a Doctor who, like the Third, is not averse to a little bit of violence. So
yeah.
he's gonna, he's gonna do a bit of Venusian Aikido. He's gonna try and he's gonna fight. There was that fight at the end of part
There is
one,
yeah,
which
yeah.
he loses, but
And I remember
off he
I felt
goes.
a bit like when you see that,
Mm.
it's a bit of a shocker in a way, because there's never really anything like that from the character, that
But
often
there
is.
is from the Pertwee days,
Yeah, there is,
he
but
was very much like that.
that's the exception to the rule, I think, and that
We've
always.
also got Tom Baker in the Seas of Doom who does quite a few decent karate chops in that story. You're right. The Doctor doesn't usually do the violence thing,
No.
but there are occasions
Yes, there are, but
when they
it's
do. So
it's not what the character's known
I
for.
mean, he shot an
Um,
Ogron in cold blood just for the sake of it in Day of the Daleks. Just picks up a gun. Oh, there's an Ogron. It's like, what'd you do that for? It's just so he could look cool with his cape,
yeah,
pointing a gun and
but
shooting
when you
stuff.
think of Doctor Who, you did, because I was talking to my son about it a while ago, and
Yeah,
he said, does he fight? And I said, not really. Does he have a gun? No. And it's quite an
yeah.
unusual
It
character.
is. The Fifth Doctor was quite often pushed into some
Mm,
really tough moral places, and you got to throw a lot of this at the feet of Eric Sayward, and people either seem to enjoy this aspect, thinking it throws a different aspect to the Doctor,
mm,
and other people take a different standpoint, which is that actually no, the Doctor would never pick up a gun. We know they have done though, and even the first Doctor picked up a big stick in the very first story
yeah,
and was do some damage with that. So, it's always there, and I think it's for me when we see these moments, it's like we understand. I kind of see it as that the Doctor will do that because they've been driven into that place
Yeah,
and there's a reason for it. So in this case, it's to allow his friends to kind of
yeah.
make a quick getaway, which
I
they
think,
don't because they stand there going, Doctor, it's like, well, run, he's
yeah,
fighting off these guards so you
I
can
think
leg it
that's
out of here.
the Doctor will do extreme things depending on the circumstance, but it's not the default. The Doctor
No,
doesn't
it's
walk
not.
into a
And
room and
again,
shoot everyone.
yeah,
It's very rare. A bit like, you remember in Doctor's Daughter when Ten is pushed. He thinks they've killed Jenny, and he takes the gun and puts it to the guys, and it's quite a shocker because it's really kind of you can tell he's right at the limit there, and
Ninth Doctor in Dalek again when he's
yeah.
faced with the creature he thought he'd wiped out at the cost of his own people. So the Doctor does do this stuff with
I'm not saying
guns.
it's not part of the character, but it's not at the
Yeah,
forefront.
I
We
agree.
don't have
Yeah,
posters of the Doctor on our walls.
holding up two guns.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the story in hand then. So we've got we do have a bit of a moral thing going on. So we've got this opportunity for the Doctor to wipe out the reptiles using this hexachromite gas. It's there. It's right there in episode 1, like Chekhov's gun, right? It destroys all marine and reptile life. So we know, really, here's the thing that can be used. The Doctor knows it's there when he sort of exits out of the bridge in part 4 when everything's sort of kicking off. He heads straight to the chemical room or chemical store, whatever it's called, allegedly looking for something more, not something less lethal that is going to debilitate rather than absolutely slaughter them. And he doesn't find it. He's kind of, we get the Sea Devil walking in. The first thing to be exposed to the hexachromate, we see it sort of melts and this green goo. Another trademark of 80s Doctor Who, aliens dissolving into vicious bubbling green glue with steam, which is lovely, and which I loved as a kid. I
quite liked it.
Give me more of that stuff. Yeah, it's great. So we get that, and then obviously the gases, and I love the fact that throughout part 4 then when the Doctor sort of makes his decision, they're going to release the gas because they really can't find anything else, but he's at least going to try and use that as leverage to get the Silurians off the base and stop them doing what they're doing. Because and as he's kind of as the whole crew is kind of working their way back to the bridge and getting attacked from all sides by more Sea Devils, ponderously pointing their guns and falling to their deaths and everything else, he still wants to do the right thing. He still wants to give the Sea Devils the opportunity to leave. It's almost like Tens. I'll give you a chance. There's a chance to do it. If you don't take it though, you're gonna end up in a puddle of green ooze on the floor. And it's already happening. This slow death is already building. So the time at which the Doctor's persuasions can be effective is getting narrower and narrower, and it sort of adds to the tension. On top of that, we got the whole missile alert thing going on, so that's all kicking off again. We've seen those BBC micro graphics on the big screen. Love that. It was cutting edge in the 80s. But and he has this thing, and what's it called, Ichthar or something, isn't it? He won't do it. It's just not going to happen, and they all fall to their deaths. And at the last minute, the Doctor has to step into the computer thing, the sync up to try and do it, but he hasn't got the jack input which Maddox had. So the Commander Vorshak, he's trying to do so. I love the ending of this, and throughout the whole thing, I honestly think that the plot points in the story are absolutely bang on. I think the tension is ratcheted up. It's the kind of story that I really like. It's just some bits of the execution, but I think the better part of part 4 is back on form, and that race, that building of tension towards the end as events kind of close in and this slow creeping death starts taking hold of the reptiles. It's all game over, but everybody's been shot or they're dissolving into a puddle. And I love the fact that even, the Doctor says to Tegan, give the Silurians some oxygen, to still try and get them through it. But in doing that, kind of signs their own death warrant, because the last thing the Silurian does with his free oxygen is shoot Vorshak, the commander, and he's kind of getting the Doctor through this process and helping him do his thing in the computer. And then, he dies when he comes out. He's been shot, so that finally takes control of him. The Doctor sort of takes this cap off, looks around at the devastation and the death. There's literally nobody left standing, reptile or human. And his eyes, he's all bruised from his the thing with the computer, they're burning out, and the trauma that he's undergone at that point to do it. We, and this is the thing about the Doctor, and particularly the Fifth Doctor, is almost like, despite his best intentions, he's channeled down a railroad of events that he cannot control. He tries to control them, but he can't. And eventually, through his companions, or through the enemies, or through the people he's surrounded with, he has to take one course of action. He tries this, it doesn't work. He tries that, it doesn't work. He can't do this, he can't do that. He's defeated constantly. The Fifth Doctor has to put up with more and more defeats. They're piled on top of him, and he still powers through it. He still tries to do the right thing. He tries to, the end of this story, which is a really good mirror to Androzani, he even puts himself in a position of sacrifice, because he doesn't know if he's going to survive this computer link-up thing, and clearly it has a debilitating effect on him, mentally and physically. He's burned out when he comes into it. You see that, as I said, the scars around his eyes, and he looks around, and despite all that, despite everything, everybody's dead. And you hear it in his voice. It should have been another way.
It's not often that the Doctor loses and or in this case wins at the same time, sort of thing. But one other example I can think of, and you might have more, is Sleep No More, which I think is an episode we should cover.
Something in my eye there. That went down my throat weirdly.
That's a brilliant episode, but they lose at the end of that. And there was always a shame that they never did the sequel that was planned for that.
Sorry, I don't know what that is.
It's a good episode. People just don't get it. But they don't win at the end of that, do they?
No, they
Not
don't.
Really.
But there's a point. Did any of that actually even exist, though? Was it even real, or was it a simulation? Was it all just pipe dreams into their head, or did it actually happen, and nothing that happened afterwards is real because they all died?
Well, we'll come to that when we look at that one
soon. Anyway, sorry.
That one layer apart.
That's going to be a fun discussion, but it's interesting, Warriors of the Deep, because it's not the best example, I don't think, of season 21, and yet it has so much good stuff going for it.
Yeah, it's maybe if the Merca wasn't in it, or it was better, it might kind of raise it for some, and I think it's all there, but circumstances around it kind of hampered it slightly. You have to kind of admire what they were trying to do with it. I enjoyed it, and I would certainly watch it again at some point, because there's a lot to learn in it. So look, I'll bring up some of the comments that we had from people. I don't know if you've seen all of these.
I've seen a few,
but our friend
read them out. Yes.
Okay. So our friend Robot of Death, he's changed his handle. Actually, he's at Graham Ward 68 now. So he said, it's an excellent story hampered by, certain issues that I'm sure you'll be covering.
There you go.
We did.
Yeah.
The will to overlook them is needed, but it's rewarding if you can.
There you go. That summed it up quite nicely, actually.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, well done.
We should just read his tweet out at the start and gone for a beer or something.
Yeah. Salty Space Ghost, who's at Salty Growl, she says it's classic 80s. The plastic modern look, the makeup, Cold War allegories, and when the villains use a security disc to reformat Maddox's brain, that's a special touch that somehow predicted the joys of computers in the 90s when reformat disc meant disaster.
It still does.
Someone called Paul, who is new to us, I think, at PCW2K.
Hey, good name. Love that name.
He just finished watching it. Yeah. Just finished watching it this morning. It's the first story I've seen where the Doctor wins, but it feels like he lost. I love the fact that he looks like he's got two black eyes.
Yeah.
Alex Green, meeting Jodie, same, whose username is iAlex_Green I think it's an I on the end. It says, I've always loved this story. Thought it was a brilliant start to season 21. Having the Sea Devils and the Silurians return to team up together was a brilliant idea. A solid start to the Fifth Doctor's final season. So Alex obviously really likes it. So again, it's so interesting how people can see things so differently. Christoroth, whose name is at Christoroth, Silurians, Sea Devils, and that pantomime seahorse thing. draped in crepe
The
paper,
scars
look
run deep.
dreadful.
Honestly, they do. If you were around at that time, mate, it's a special race memory that we all Doctor Who fans who saw that first time still carry.
Yeah, he's obviously
Yeah,
sharing that. Yeah, he says it really ruins whatever merit it might otherwise have had. And then we've got someone else who's new to us, I think. Left of centrist dad, who's
I love these sandals.
antisocial sock 19. I think it's underrated. It's a
Yeah,
pretty good base under siege if you can look past the effects. Thomas Hines, he just says it's an okay Fifth Doctor story. Daniel Knight, who's at Daniel Knight 73, says not as bad as its reputation, but still not great. Some bad direction choices, guards standing in plain sight waiting to be shot. That's like
yeah, yeah,
in old sort of action and fight films where they all stand around the hero and take
yeah.
one in a turn to go for him.
That's
The
it. Yeah,
murder, the arms make it look stupid, the eye makeup and the unrelenting grimness. But on the plus side, Peter Davison gives a great performance.
yeah.
Our pal Oliver Street, he says it's not that bad. I had a good time with it.
Good
Which
man.
is great. Jason Thompson at Jason_JTT, almost relentlessly grim, which much like what Daniel said. Peter reportedly had to fight just to get one vaguely humorous line in. I don't know if you know anything about that,
Oh,
Paul.
I don't know about that. Right.
Made even more so by Eric Saywood's insistence that everyone bar the regulars die by the end. A depressingly cynical start to season 21. And then this is the one that I read before I watched the show, of the series again. Sadako24, who's at Sadako241, says, worst thing the show ever produced. A criminally negligent doctor, fanfic level writing that had no
Oh,
business
that's
being
harsh.
broadcast, and an anti-war message that basically says violence is bad, so just let the enemy kill you all. How we got from City of Death to this in 5 years baffles me.
Interesting point. I think that sounds very harsh to me.
Yeah, I read that and I was like, oh God.
So then you weren't
What-
looking forward to watching this, then, were
have,
you?
have I remembered this one completely differently? So yeah, I don't entirely agree with that. But again, it's look at those tweets there. Alex really liked it. Sadako really disliked it. Other people felt that, much like we do, I think that it's had things holding it back and wasn't as bad as perhaps the the perception is on it. It's a bit like Sleep No More, really. That is a meta masterpiece.
Oh, sorry, mate. That's stuff in my eyes.
We'll have to do that one, actually. I'll be interested to see what people think of that, because they're wrong. They are wrong about that one. Maybe it's just because it's Clara's last adventure. Maybe that's why.
It's getting late. Is that time already, mate? Can I just say? Can I just big up the target novel of Warriors of the Deep?
That's a cracking cover image there.
I love it. Yeah, it's great. Season 21 was a kind of watershed in so many ways, right? Because if not just on TV, also in the target books, we finally got away from those bloody horrible photographic covers that had dominated the Peter Davison Doctor Who novels. They were awful. I think Snake Dance and Enlightenment from the previous season, and then the Five Doctors, we'd started to move away with Andrew Skillett as drawings, but the covers of all of the season 21 stories are fantastic, and I love them lords, and I want to have their children. So there you go. And I love that one. I remember reading this on my way up to my grandparents in Yorkshire.
Really?
And I loved it. I really enjoyed the book, because in the book, the Merker was a really fearsome beast.
Yeah.
And I really, really hope that when we see Legend of the Sea Devils, and I think I might have said this on a previous Sea Devils podcast, but I really hope we see a really good Merker.
Yeah.
I honestly, if they can pull that off, then frankly, it's healed the scars from 40 years ago. And I could just go to my grave happy.
Yeah,
I will, absolutely. I'll be a better person for it if I can do that. Just show me a Merker. I think we've had one in a Big Finish story, but obviously you can't see it.
No.
I need to see it, on a telly, looking like a big beast from the fathoms. I mean, a big Kraken-esque kind of thing, fizzing with electromagnetic pulsing radiation or something. Electric pump, fill with electrics. Yeah, there we go. It's giving off electrics. That's what we need. Big fierce, big teeth, big claws, and electricals. That'll do me.
That's quite a good end there.
Yeah. On that note, because we've been talking long enough now, haven't we?
Thanks for listening, everyone. And if you have been inspired to rewatch Warriors of the Deep, let us know what you think of it, or just let us know what you think of it in general. If you've watched it recently or a long time ago, we'll be back next week. At the time of recording, I'm not sure what our episode will be because there's various things.
We mixed them up a bit, haven't we? Actually.
Yeah. So
we mixed them up. Yeah, we're recording out of sequence, you might say.
Yeah. So we've still got our Ray Holman episodes to come out as we're recording this, and then this will come out after those, and we'll have some other stuff done in the meantime. But stick with us; we've got some really great and exciting things coming up. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's been fun, this one. I've enjoyed talking about this one. Actually.
Yeah, it's been good.
All right,
yeah.
Do this again, mate.
Varied discussion. Yeah.
Should do a podcast.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. Did you record this one?
Oh shit. Oh yeah, better hit the record button, hadn't I?